And now I am thrilled to present the first in a 1058-part interview series, Alex Coulombe Talks to People. First up, Danton Spina, architect, designer, master extraordinaire. Enjoy.
Hi there, welcome to the first WACTS interview series thing. We're going to be interviewing Danton Spina about his project this year. It was called Every Week for a Year, where over the course of the year, every week he was working on a new project and tried to complete it just in what time he could muster in that week, little hour chunks, lunch breaks and things like that. And it's finally over. We finished the last one last night, kind of, and we're just going to hear a little bit about what that was like. So first question, Danton, why did you decide to do this?
I decided to do this because I wanted to force myself to get projects done that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And even though I have very little readership on my blog, it makes me feel accountable and I get all these things done that I've been wanting to get done. 52 projects now.
How many of the 52 projects were already projects that were on your plate before the whole project started? And project?
Project. I would say there were probably like 40 that were already on the list that have been accumulating year after year, and I was feeling like I never had time to work on them. And then I started chipping away at it, and I needed to get more projects to fill a year.
So were any of the projects things that you thought might end, were they all things you were super excited about, or were some of them things where you're like, I should really learn how to do this, it's going to be a bit of a chore, but then you just kind of worked through it?
Yeah, there were definitely a handful where it's a chore, but I wanted to learn like Ruby, for example, so I made that one of them.
It's a scripting language.
Or Adobe Audition. I hadn't really used that software before.
That's for sound editing.
Adobe Premiere.
That's for video editing.
Video editing. Magic. So all those kind of things. I try to force myself into a corner. It makes you work a little bit harder and just figure stuff out on your own.
Did you have a favorite project?
Oh, I actually am going to release this list in the next week.
Okay.
I'm still trying to compile it. But off the top of my head, I think actually our Germany trip, which was, I ended up making one of our projects.
We went to Germany together.
Yeah. We had this cool, fun design competition. It was 72 hours, so it was a lot more than 7 hours, which is what most of my projects are. But it was a lot of fun, really cool results, and quick turnaround.
What about projects that you thought were going to be boring, but actually ended up being really exciting? Were there any like that, where you thought it was going to be a slog, and then you kind of got into it and was like, oh, actually, I'm digging this?
Yeah, some of the really simple projects, just like writing a couple plays, even early on, where I was just like, this is going to be painful. And then before I knew it, I was just like going nuts during every lunch break and writing all sorts of stuff. And I had a very coherent play at the end. Like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. So are there some, obviously, because you're constraining everything to week-long chunks, some projects you could only really get started with, he started working on a Firefly spec script, which was really cool, and we started collaborating on that, and it would be cool to continue on that. Yeah. Are there other projects like that that you think would be really exciting now that you have a little bit more leeway, that you want to go back and kind of work on more?
Yes, definitely. I have, in this next coming weeks, I'm taking a short hiatus from year one of my project into year two, which I can talk about in a minute. But basically, I'm going to use that interstitial time to do some competition deadlines and go back and touch up. It's a lot of writing deadlines, plays, some prose, short stories, and one eyeglass design competition, and a few other random things. Yeah.
What's the eyeglass design competition?
I can't remember all the details. I think the company's called OCP. It's like a German company, and just to design cool new eyewear, and it has to follow certain guidelines. I was working on that as one of my projects, but it was barely out of the concept phase when I finished after the 7 hours.
Very cool. Why don't you tell our lovely audience what your pyramid scheme is for this?
My pyramid scheme.
All these projects.
So my goal is, this year was 52 projects, which is one every week. So I basically spent 7 hours on each project, though I very often went over the 7 hours. But yeah, the goal is each year I will build towards a bigger and bigger project. So this next year I'm doing one every month. So I'll still post every week for a year, but it'll be like a segment, like 4 weeks, the 1 month project. And then, so that'll be 12 for an entire year. And then the next year I'm going to do one every quarter or 3 months. So it'll be 4 for the whole year. And then the final one, if for some reason I have something that can do this, it'll be 1 year-long project.
Right, if it's something you're really passionate about and you think could sustain your interest that
Yeah.
long. So give us an example of the kind of project you might tackle over the coming year that seems like it would have been too intense a project for 1 week, but maybe, you know.
Yeah, well, a lot of them spawned, I would say about half, maybe a little more even, came out of this year, where it was something that I really loved and I've been thinking about for a while, wanted to work on, but it was definitely not a 7-hour project and needs more time. I have a documentary / film that I've been working on for a while about Huntington's disease. It's very close to my heart, and I just want to really work a lot of that out, get the script really polished, and so I think that needs more attention than just 1 week, and then done. And I have a animated series that I want to work on called Good Cop, Bear Cop, which Alex has been working on also, and I worked on the sprites for the characters. I want to develop a lot of that. I want to develop backgrounds. I want to work on scripts and all that kind of stuff. And then, there's a handful of new stuff where I just want to, again, force myself to work on something that might be a little bit more interesting. But I definitely whittled out a lot of things that I know I don't like, or maybe not that I don't like them, but they're very clearly a 1 week project.
Sure.
And then it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, Danton's a very ambitious fellow. We've been working together for a long time. We met in college, and we've had a lot of projects since then. We co-founded a theater group called What together, and Danton's had like a driving energy that's made a lot of stuff get together. Let's talk very briefly about ambition. What drives you?
What drives you? That's such a deep question.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So we've been in New York. I've been living in New York City for a few years. Danton's been in Philadelphia and California, and we met a lot of people. And I have to say, I'm a little surprised by how few people I've come across that have the kind of passion and energy to do the kind of projects that people like Danton try to accomplish. And so it's now that I'm more aware that it's not such a common trait, I'm particularly curious what you think it is that you have propelling you that maybe isn't the thing that everyone has.
Oh man, that's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll fit in the time of this vlog.
Sure.
But I think the big compelling thing for me is just I've always had this desire to create. It started very small. I love the process of creation, almost to a point where I end up in the concept phase on too many projects and don't necessarily finish them as long term. But the point is that when you create something, and I think you see it get past that initial stage, and something actually happens. Like once that happens with any one project that you're working on, I promise you will realize, look at that sense where you're just like, oh man, like this can actually work. I can do something. These things that just seem so far off that, only some superstar or celebrity does, like it seems so distant. But every year as I get older into adulthood, I actually feel closer to those things, even as exotic as they seem. I'm like, I could be a writer on that show.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
Like that would have sounded crazy to say, and I don't necessarily think I'm the best writer even, but the point is it's a lot has to do with ambition and persistence. And something that this project's all about is just purely time. I mean, 1 hour a day has added up now. I've spent 650 hours over the course of the year on all these different projects. Which ended up averaging more than 7 hours a week. I think I did the math, and again, it'll be on my blog. But
650 hours, 365 days in a year. Do the math.
Yeah, so it ends up being a lot of time.
Yeah, and yet, a lot of people, that's less than the amount of time they spend just sitting down watching TV, doing nothing in a given day. So to be putting that time to be doing something more active just seems like a much better use of time in many ways.
I think so.
Failure. Are you afraid of doing something in such a way where people are like, that really sucks, why do you even try?
Initially I think I was.
Yeah.
I'm talking about before this project even, where you're just like, man, what if that's not good? What? But I think you realize, again, that's one of those things, once you do have something that's even remotely successful, and that doesn't mean, you had 1 million people show up at your first performance. That's highly unlikely. Our first play with What?
Right.
There was like less people one night in the audience than there were actors on the stage.
And there were only 8 actors. So,
it happens. Yeah. But then that group is now one of the biggest groups at Syracuse. So the point is, again, time, persistence, energy, you learn things as you go. Failure is like the key to success, really. They're all one and the same, I think.
Yeah, and it seems a lot like in America in particular, there's a real stigma around failure. There's a real sense that if you do something wrong, that there's something wrong with you. That's you should only ever be trying something if you're absolutely confident it's going to work out perfectly the very first time. And I think that prevents a lot of people from trying things out. You were talking the other day, or someone was talking, was it you? I can't remember. Someone was telling me a story about someone who was trying to paint or like do something artistic, and then they had a moment where
this is a David Kelly.
David Kelly
of IDEO.
IDEO.
Yeah.
Tell the story.
Well, David Kelly has this thing where he talks about he had a classmate when he was younger who essentially was doing something creative, and then one of the students is like, "Oh, that doesn't look like a horse. You know, that's not how a horse is supposed to look." And the kid just got really disheartened and kind of threw the horse away and just went on and did his own thing. Alex is pulling some books off the shelf, which we both like, especially What is it? Weird Ideas at Work. I've read that. Yeah. And just he's a really brilliant creative guy, but basically saying that creative moment was just stamped out early on, and then he continued to go to school with this kid and realized over the next few years that he never felt like he could do anything creative and just completely shut that part of his brain down, I guess. And that's a really sad thing. You want to, there's a level of encouragement at the younger age. When you're older, it's different to receive criticism. I think it's valuable, but when you're younger, you need that foundational encouragement to be like, a lot of wacky ideas are very, have so much potential, especially kids' ideas. They are some of the greatest. I mean, nowadays you hear all the time about a kid that created an app that does all sorts of cool stuff and it didn't take them up much time at all, or a kid that ends up on Shark Tank inventing some cool cleaner. I don't know. Like they're just very clever. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we both feel that architecture school was a really good place for us, not just because of the architectural education, and we're both working in those industries now, but the way that it teaches you to think. It gets you comfortable with critique and putting things together very quickly on a tight deadline and not feeling too self-conscious of like, oh, it's not quite perfect, I can't show it to anyone yet. So I think it's affected the way that we pursue all sorts of different endeavors, even the totally non-architecture ones.
Yeah.
You agree?
I do agree.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Danton. This is our first in a series of interviews, I'm sure, and wish him luck on his next project. If anyone wants to check out what he's done over the past year, the blog is
everyweekforayear.com. It'll be down there.
Yeah. Is it like .tumblr? Oh, it's just .com.
everyweekforayear.com. Pretty straightforward.
Very simple. It's a great blog. Check it out. He did great detail about everything. There's pictures. It's everything from sketches to coding to software to woodworking projects.
You can sort by type.
Yeah.
By week. All sorts of stuff.
He organized it very, very well. It's something to behold. Great.
Thank you.